welcome to another edition of the Event Industry News podcast. Today I am joined by Laurie Hoinkes, the Managing Director of Montgomery Events. If you don't know who Montgomery Events are, go and check them out. But the research that I've done, interestingly, 124 years old, running over 65 events and exhibitions internationally, Asia Pacific, Middle East, in lots of quite diverse portfolios and industries and stuff like that, Laura. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Montgomery, and also a bit about the events and kind of the industries that you support?
Sure. So first, I should just explain that Montgomery Events is part of Montgomery Group. So Montgomery Group has the 65 different events all around the globe, been around for very close to 125 years. And I run Montgomery Events, which is a subset of the group. And so Montgomery Events, we focus mainly on food, drink, and hospitality. So we run the UK's largest food, drink, and hospitality events, as well as a number of different niche events in the UK and also in the Netherlands. And and I've been with the company for just over 3 years now. I just had my 3-year anniversary. So fairly new to exhibitions. It was my first time kind of like coming into this space, and I love it. So that's us.
Okay, we are currently running this podcast or recording it, which will go out in the next week or so. Still in lockdown, still in the current pandemic. How has Montgomery fared during this time? What's the situation look like for you guys as a company?
So actually, I think we fared better than we expected. And because if you'd asked us a few months ago, could everyone work remotely? People would have said, no, we need to be in our teams. And it's actually worked really well. And we had a few things that we'd wanted to, I love technology. And I was kind of like, guys, we have Office 365. Why aren't we using, OneDrive? And why aren't we, getting on board with Microsoft Teams, and there's all these things we could do, and there was really no traction at all to get there. And now we're like, able to bulk edit files and have all these sort of Teams meetings or Zoom, whatever is appropriate. And so we've just embraced a whole new way of working. And so from that point of view, I think that's a little silver lining, really. Yeah. So we're getting on. Sort of business as usual, but because we run events, obviously, depending on when the different events are scheduled, we have more or less comfort with how likely they are to go forward, and that's something we need to be evaluating on a daily basis.
You obviously run events internationally as well. Do you see certain markets potentially coming back before maybe here in Europe and the UK? I've heard things about Asia Pacific and those regions potentially starting to kick off events, which is good news. And I suppose that would filter this way. Is that what you guys are seeing? Yeah.
So we have a managing director out in Singapore, Chris McEwen, and so so we have a catch-up call a couple times a week, actually, and it definitely seems like there will be, a first movement will be out in Asia, and it'll be interesting to watch how things go, and just try and gather some lessons learned from others.
Yeah,
we also have an agency as well, OTSA, and so they work with organizers, all over as well, and so listening to the information that they can gather has been really useful.
That's awesome. And we're not here to talk about the pandemic too much. I want to talk to you about your super high interest in technology and data and how Montgomery are using that to better understand their audience. But my one last question to you just on this current situation is, when events and exhibitions come back, what do you think personally that might look like? Do you think it'll look like what we're used to 6 weeks ago or more? Or do you think that the format might have to change and adapt slightly to deal with certain social distancing restrictions and I suppose the interest levels of attendees and exhibitors?
I mean, that's a hard one to answer. I think longer term, 18 months, 2 years out, things will go back to fairly close to normal, but there'll be some slight differences and shifts. And I think people might engage virtually a little bit more sort of in the, maybe not at the event, but in the lead up to the event. So engaging their audience on a more 365 kind of way, leveraging some of the new tricks we've learned. But I think people crave live events, and that will still be strong. But I think the next 18 months, it's going to be a little bit of a transition, and we will probably see where some venues and events, it does make sense and they can still operate with a certain amount of social distancing. But I would say for our events, that would be a challenge for us, just based on our cost structure and being able to give the right return on investment to our exhibitors. If we were having to meter people in and keep them distanced, that would be pretty difficult to do.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. Exhibitions work in the format that you do and have done for even longer than Montgomery's been around, right? If you look back at the first exhibition, the format, the aisles, the way the exhibitors and attendees interact hasn't drastically changed too much. We've learned more about event design. That's got to be true, and how to filter people around an exhibition. But I can't see, I think some of the heart and soul and the buzz of what you feel at an exhibition would be lost by almost the IKEA style, you have to wait your turn, or like what we're used to now at Tesco and Sainsbury's and things like that.
Talking to the screen between us. Hello.
The exhibitors might love it because they're like, we get to speak to every single person that comes past us. It's like, you shall not pass until you've spoken to me and I've scanned your badge. But, I think you're very right. It's really hard to predict. It's really hard to determine what events will look like over the next 6, 12, 18 months. But what I'm very positive and confident about is that the appetite for them has not gone away. From an organizational point. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, people want to kick business back off, right? They want to, and what better way to kickstart business than something like an exhibition where you can get so much work done, so many meetings and so much business done in such a short period of time. It's a really cost-effective and streamlined process to do that. And that's why obviously we see exhibitions all around the world for every sector. So we'll see, I guess. We'll see. But brings me on to, I suppose, what you guys were doing before this all happened and probably are working very hard on still now. And that's around the data and the digital side of Montgomery, right? I don't want to kind of take away and explain too much, but can you take us back to the first point in which you started to look at your data and the way that you were approaching visitors and exhibitors, and why you might have changed the way that you were looking at that information?
Sure. So like I said, I'm fairly new to this industry, and I came out of from a manufacturing background and mainly did transformation. So it could be physical transformation, digital transformation, looking at systems and processes and how things are done. So that's sort of how I approach everything. And when I was starting to interview for the role, obviously I did a lot of research. And one of the things I said in my interview to the group managing director, Damien Angus, was that I believed he had a data company, not an exhibition company. And he just happened to collect his data through running exhibitions, and that any strategy we put in place needed to be a data strategy more so than anything else. And it probably sounded at the time a little bit like, but he really embraced it. And I think from day one, so it's been a 3-year journey, we've been looking at the data and looking at how we do what we do and moving along. And in the beginning, it was fairly straightforward. I mean, the first thing we had to do was get a CRM that was really strong and easy to use and going to be really fit for purpose, because we had been using a CRM that was really crap. And I would say that to say we were using it is kind of not exactly.
Yeah, maybe like 5%, 10% of it's
a few people put some things in there. We used it more from the finance side to issue contracts and all that kind of stuff, but we didn't use it as a CRM properly.
On the CRM side, which platform out of interest did you settle on?
We settled on Pipedrive, and it's a CRM that was developed by salespeople for salespeople, and it's just a great tool and really cost effective as well. And we've been able to customize it very simply, writing our own integration and things that I was able to do just on my own rather than having to get someone in to do it. So we've made it very flexible for what we need.
And we use Pipedrive here as well. And I think one of the comparisons that we make as well is when you look at other platforms like Salesforce and those out there, they become cost prohibitive to a certain extent, especially if you don't use all the functionality and all the hooks and all that kind of stuff. And then when you look at the amount of money that you could save by using a system like Pipedrive, which is probably just about as feature rich when you know how to use the API and stuff like that, and you save all that money, it means you can do a lot more with that data and reinvest that money as well, doesn't it? You know, yeah. It's a very good system, yeah.
That's exactly what we did. So we went and kind of centered everything around that CRM at first, and then really focused on the exhibitor at first, and now, say maybe about 2 years into the transformation journey, we started to focus a little bit more on the visitor. I don't know how much detail I should really go into, but I think that...
Don't give all your secrets away.
I know. One of the things that when you start to look at all the data that we had, one of the things that became the most critical to me was being able to segment it properly. So, what you could do is you could just ask all your salespeople, when you go into a lead, could you categorize them for me, please? And that's what, we had done I guess, for years and years. And when you looked at those categories, they were just all over the map and you couldn't trust anything that was in there.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we really struggled with from the exhibitor side is that as we put everything into our CRM and we wanted to start using the data smartly and going out, and doing campaigns. So right now I'm focusing on, I want to get, maybe security, hotel security exhibitors in. Well, I can't find hotel security exhibitors, or I can't find cheese manufacturers, so we wanted to be able to start to segment. And we realized that there was no way that you could trust the team to do it. We had, tens and tens of thousands of records. So we weren't going to, sit and go through them ourselves. So we knew we needed something, a tool that could start to categorize them. And my husband he also works for the company. He's our Chief Innovation and Insight Officer, and he does a lot of the coding, and we kind of work on this stuff together. And so we were on a cruise at Christmas, I guess a year and a half ago.
Okay, yeah.
And I was just saying to Rodney, the biggest problem I have is I just need a better way of categorizing. And I know we had done a tech startup before. We'd used some technology like this. I'm like, I know we could adapt it and be able to do this for our database. So we had 4 days at sea. And so I convinced him during those 4 sea days where we couldn't go anywhere anyway, we were stuck on the ship, let's work on creating this tool that will be able to categorize our data. Yeah.
That's awful, so Lauren. What are you doing? I'm the same, but...
And, well, we both kind of like it, and so we work on it together so that when you're creating a tool like this, there's lots of testing and how did it work and checking different types of keywords and that. So we were able to do it, together. We were spending quality time together. and so we created a tool. We call it Bento because it's you're categorizing things into their little categories. And yeah, so that's sort of the first big tool that we created sort of on our own to be able to go through any set of data and categorize it.
Just on that then, developing your own platform, you're lucky that you clearly have a talented husband who's willing to work on holiday. And, many companies tend to go externally and try and find tools and solutions that are off the shelf or a developer can work with them and create what they deemed to be necessary. Very, very rarely actually fits and ticks all the boxes. Was that the case for you, that you couldn't find anything, or you just wanted to work from the ground up and build something very specific for the business? Yeah,
I've not seen a tool that's able to do what we needed to do. I mean, you can go and hire a consultant or people to do it for you, but it would be really cost prohibitive. And the thing is that we want to slice this and dice our information so many different ways and so many different times. And because we do food, drink, and hospitality, and those sort of communities can overlap quite a bit, because in hospitality, obviously there's a food and drink element there. We needed something that was flexible and that we could focus it in this direction and then focus it in that direction. So it wasn't really an option to kind of go and work with someone. It would have been cost prohibitive. And we felt like we needed our own system. I mean, I didn't mention it before, but in addition to getting the right CRM in place, the other thing I did was make sure that we had a common platform we were all working from. Yeah. Because one of the things that you find in exhibition companies is, this leader likes this supplier and they work with they do this, use these people for their registration and these people for their websites. And these guys over here are doing something completely different. And one of the things I knew right away, if we were going to do anything more sophisticated, we had to be on a common platform. We would lose all economies of scale and opportunity if we started, piecemealing, you do it this way and we do it this way. So we needed to, first of all, be common on a common platform.
And just on that, again, I think there's been a call recently in the industry for data across suppliers to be formatted in an agreed way, so that you have to, because of maybe logistics or things like that, when you get that data back, you can still use it in the same way. Everybody seems to format their exports in different ways and do different things, which means it really becomes unusable, right?
Yeah, data has to be comparable, and it's really, you could say different teams do it different ways, but even an individual, when they ask the survey questions or the registration questions on, what one cycle of their event, they might ask them slightly different in the next cycle. And so one of the things around standardization that I won't say we've nailed it, we're working on, is really harmonizing there, so that we also make sure that when I take a set of, say, registration data, I can put it into our data warehouse and access it for all the different years, because I've made sure that all of the different columns are comparable. Yep. So if we asked one time, what sector do you work in? And we called them one thing one time, and then the next year we asked them, what part of the industry do you work in instead? We need to make sure that we're using very precise language and consistently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's amazing. The fact that you've taken it upon yourself, one, just to have that foresight to streamline supplier process and unify the data coming into the business. You're setting yourselves up for success, because it's not necessarily right now. It might be in the next 5 years when you want to launch a new event or do an extra element to the event or something like that, or you have, your sales team has a great sponsorship idea and you want to target those key people, right?
Yeah.
We
need to gather that data to be able to have some objective evidence that this is who you're going to be able to target, and we can segment them, and we know these are the people that are really important to you. Absolutely. And it's important to be able to demonstrate that.
So how have you structured, because a lot of people, when it comes to personalization, they want 95 million different options, and they think that actually going super granular is the way forward, because hyper personalization we see a lot is apparently the way to go forward, which I'm not so sure about myself. How have you set Bento up for the success of how to use the data?
Yeah, so I think that we've tried to make sure that there's a little bit of flexibility there. Mm-hmm. So one of the nice things about being able to run Bento for a campaign is if you wanted to go kind of like granular. So say as an event manager, I've put into my commercial plan that I want to really target, soft drink manufacturers. We might not have previously categorized them down to that level. We might have just put them into another category. But if you wanted to do a specific campaign, what we can do is work with our business intelligence team. It's really little, but we work with them, and we could bento our data separately for soft drinks. We need to understand what are the types of keywords that we need to be searching for, and how do we identify and isolate soft drink manufacturers. But we could do that. The thing is I always say to the team, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. Yeah. And so we have to be smart about it. So, maybe a soft drink campaign isn't going to give us a huge return on the time it would take. So we might not go there, but we might. And I think you would find that with events, you kind of have like peaks and troughs of amount of effort and work that's required. And so if you're kind of like, in the early stages of planning and there's a little bit of spare capacity, you might set up some of the data sets that you're going to need for campaigns like that. Yeah. And then you might not actually action them until later. So we can go quite granular if we want to, and we think it makes sense. But for the rest of the data, we've tried to use fewer categories rather than more. So to give you an example, we just had an event where we were really able to start unleashing all this hard work for the last couple of years, which was the Hotel, Restaurant, and Catering show, which happened in early March and actually happened. Yeah. Goodness. And so that show, it's all things hospitality. We have 4 sort of subsections of the show: food and drink, technology, interiors and tableware, and then equipment. So it covers all kinds of types of visitors that would come to the show. But what we did was we actually only focused on 6 personas. So you could have easily said there could have been 90 odd personas that you could pick and say, these are important visitors to this event. But we only picked 6, but we picked the 6 that we felt would deliver the most value to our exhibitors if we had a real stepped increase in their participation in the event. And that's what I think is important. And the other thing is that you can identify the data and be like, here, these are all our chefs, but you have to be able to do something with it. Yeah. And if you're not going to be able to action it, having it as a little subset of your data, it's not really useful. So it's about thinking, from your commercial and marketing teams, how much can we really do anything about? And so we had 6 personas that we wanted to focus on. And I would say 4 of them we focused more deeply on than the total 6. So we were strategic in how we put our effort forward to get the results we were looking for.
And what did you ran that in March. Have you had time to look back at the results of that? If you did, what did that success look like? Did you have targets in place? Did you have certain things that you wanted to reach and earmark out, and did you get there?
Yeah, so I think that we're still analyzing the data a little bit because there's so much that you can look through, and we want to really try and learn as much from that experience as possible for our next time that we run sort of our largest events. Yep. And so I think the first learning I would say is that we had, tailored messaging for those 6 personas and then kind of the rest of the population. And what we found is that there was a significant increase in conversion from getting an email to registering for those 6. It varied depending on the 6. Some were like 400% more than the average because we were just really focused on them, and others it was a 33% uplift. So it kind of ran the gamut, but I think the minimum we saw was a 33% uplift over the general population. So these targeted emails were really useful. So for chefs, for example, obviously chefs in a hospitality show, pretty key. Yeah. So we wrote really chefy content to them to get them to register. And they registered at a much higher rate than the general population with this chef content. But like I said before, we went to painstaking effort to make sure that these are chefs. Combing through our data, they're definitely chefs. And then what we found is that then we sent them still chefy content to convert them to attendance, and we had a massive uplift in their conversion to attendance than we did, again, the general population. So that's a tick. We like that. Interestingly enough, though, and what I'm always trying to do is get away from declared data and rely more on behavioral data. Interestingly enough, though, of all the people who we made sure they were chefs, and then we sent them chefy content and then got them to register, only 38% of them actually declared they were a chef. Really? And so we went back through and we were like, but this guy's clearly a chef. Why has he said he's not? And this person's a chef and this person's a chef. And so it just proves, intuitively I felt that, because when I register you could go back, Adam, and look at what I put down for your event. I'm sure I put some, who knows what I put. I
think you said cleaner, right? You were like, I don't want to be known by all these guys. I don't want to get,
I just kind of tick the first box. I'm just like, don't have time to register. I do it really quickly. So what we've really understood is that, the least reliable source of data that we have is anything that's declared.
Can I just expand on that then? Because this is something that I've been, and registration companies out there will hate me for saying this.
I know.
But, the people want a quick process, don't they, when they want, I'm interested in this event, please just send me my entrance voucher or my accreditation and badge, etc. In general, happy to give business emails because they want that communication to come through some of them at work, and give them a name, right? And even with that data, the tools that we use, I could identify what that person is from LinkedIn profiles and other data that's available to them on site. But we insist on collecting all this information about them just to double check. And they're probably repeat visitors in most cases, maybe not every single year, but they've definitely probably been in a previous edition over the last 3-4 years, if we've targeted them right. but we make them go through this registration process. And then actually what they do is similar to you. They just rush through it because they want to get registered. They know who they're seeing. And then at Event Tech Live, we use lots of technology around tracking and lead scanning, and we look at that information, and that's totally different to whatever they would say to us in the beginning. Even in a lot of cases where we think people have actually taken the time to fill out that registration form accurately in their opinion, still what they've done at the event and how they've interacted with exhibitors and sponsors and all that kind of stuff is in most cases totally different to what they've told us they're coming to the event for. Do you see in the future focusing more on what happens rather than what they tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been a big shift for us. So the first time we tested it on our pub show, which was in February, but the first time we really unleashed it in a big way was at Hotel, Restaurant, and Catering.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is almost not even pay any attention to registration data or behavior declared data. Mm-hmm. So what we did there was, we had to start this about a year earlier. So one of the things we recognized is that I really need as many people as possible to have a lead scanner and to be scanning their leads, because I can learn a lot about which visitors were interested in that exhibitor by them allowing the badge to be scanned. And because I've already started to do bento so that I understand this visitor better than whatever they said they are, I feel like I know that visitor better. I maybe know my exhibitor a little bit better. And now I can see what they're doing in the show and who they're allowing to scan them. I mean, none of these things are 100% perfect. There's always error, because sometimes you're walking there and you're like, oh, geez, scan me. Okay, whatever. But you can see those anomalies in the data when you start to look at you pick out case studies and start to follow it through. And so what we did is we started working on making sure we could put a lead scanner in every single exhibitor's hand. So first thing we did was we gave one free to everyone and working with a supplier. And then we realized that was going to be cost prohibitive, and just giving them one was not what we needed. So we created our own in-house lead scanner app. And that way we could offer unlimited downloads to everyone who wants one across all of Montgomery, which is really helpful. So
and again, on that, I would imagine by giving them your own in-house lead scanner, the collection of that data and information is aligned with however you want it as well out of the back end, right? You've got that connectivity of the two systems, really.
Yeah, because you're setting it up to make sure, again, that all your data is comparable, and it all needs to be comparable. So you're not trying to like make it work with integration of all these systems. We're in a lot more control this way, so it's been really good. So we needed to make sure everyone had a lead scanner. The other thing we did is obviously bento everything so that we know a lot more about each of the individual participants. And then we've created a tool called Sherlock, because we love to create funny tools and give them our own name. So what we did is we looked at, okay, we need some sort of way to pull all this information together and to kind of create a report card or a health check on your event. And so what we've done is we use sort of information from Bento, which covers all kinds of ways of trying to understand who someone is, from social listening to LinkedIn to what their website says to all kinds of different ways. Then we've taken registration data, because it is still some data, and we do every now and then someone's honest about it. So we do look at our reg data. We look at our scanner data, so who was all scanned at the event. And then we still do the traditional survey data, because I think there's some value there, especially if you can make sure that you have a statistically significant data set, like enough people to make it something that you should pay attention to. And we basically pull all that information together and we chop it and change it in different ways to kind of create a baseline report of how things are going. So we look at net promoter score, as and the usual things, but we go into a much more granular level. So I want to know, if I'm looking at the independent hotel show, I want to know net promoter score for my 5-star hoteliers versus my 4-star hoteliers versus my 3-star hoteliers, because it matters. And it's interestingly enough, you'll see sometimes where, the net promoter score might be 15 on average for your audience, but it might be minus 32 for your key audience. And so if you don't know that, you might have a false sense of confidence in how you're doing. So we've really, so Sherlock is our sort of tool that we've created in-house to really aggregate all of the information that we could possibly find and try and use it in a smart way.
That's so interesting. I think I've been saying for a long time, for probably the last decade, while I've been in the throes of event technology, that we have all this data, and it is powerful only if you can use it internally for your own objectives or the objectives of your sponsors, your customers, your attendees. And I think a lot of organizers are actually drowning in data because it's siloed in different ways and they can't bring it together in a format which they can understand it and then make actions on it. Data is useful if you don't have visibility or you don't understand how to use it. Has that played a part in? I'm assuming that Montgomery have taken a lot of time with the team to understand what this data looks like and how to use it effectively, right? As part of not just building the tech. The tech is one part, but it's about, I suppose, culture and understanding of how to use that data, right?
Yeah, I would say that tech is kind of the easy part, because I could be like, Rodney, you're not having any holiday. You're making this bento tool with me. I'll test it. You do some coding. So the tech part in some ways is easy. The making use of it is the hard part. And especially like we said, that, Montgomery Group represents a lot of different events. Even in my part of the business, we have 9 different events that we run, 8 different event managers. So, and we don't have, like I said, we can do anything. We're like, a super team, but we can't do everything. And so what we've been doing up until now is piloting, in a sense, and testing it and getting it at the right level where we've scaled it up. So we've scaled it up on an event that took place last month. And so what I'm focusing on now is how we now roll it out across all of the shows in a way that people can do something with it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that and again, this is my background. I love continuous improvement and, making better processes and systems for how we do what we do. So where I think, this next few months, what I'm focusing on right now is making sure that I give my team the sort of training and support and frameworks that they need to now leverage these tools. So it starts way back from like, what is the framework for doing an event plan? We have a cycle that we go through. We have a preliminary event plan, a detailed event plan, our your sort of preparation and execution, then on site. And so how do I take the output from Sherlock and put that into my detailed event planning? What does that look like? What are some of the key questions I should be asking? So we're trying to give people a framework that's not quite, paint by numbers, but it's a little bit more, it can be slightly more systematic. It's whether you're running a food event or a industrial coatings event. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in how you understand your audience and how you assess the health of your event and how you move it forward. So we're trying to leverage that. We're also, so I think that's the first bit. And then going through training. So we did some training last week on just project management. I kind of did 2 versions, 1.0 and 2.0, kind of like, some basics in project management and some a little more sophisticated tools. So making sure everyone knows, okay, well, what does a proper root cause analysis look like? So, right now knee-jerk reactions always to address the symptom and not the root cause. So how do I find the root cause? Or if I'm looking more strategically at my event, maybe teaching them things like, Porter's 5 forces and SWOTs and different tools they could use to look at that. So we're really sort of doubling down right now on making sure that how we do what we do is tighter and standardized and there's frameworks provided to people. And yet, but still listening and taking on board how, individual experiences and stuff like that to make sure it's as robust as possible. And in some ways, that's, again, our silver lining, because I actually have a little bit more time now to work with the team not a lot, I'm still really busy, but a little bit more time where we can say, like, guys, let's just focus on making sure that we take in some of this new knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's so important, taking the time to really make sure that your team understands what it means to them, the benefits to them, how to use systems, onboarding, and this will probably play out as Montgomery bringing new talent into the business, right? There'll be a process of going, right, here are the tools that's available to you. To any business, one of the biggest cost centers is individual people spending time on a project, right? And we talk in the industry about streamlining and working smarter and all this kind of stuff. Again, the technology can help support that. But if somebody's not super clear on how to use something or the best way to use it for the objective that they've set out, then you've essentially wasted man hours, which means money, right?
Yeah.
Again. And then, if we can tighten all that up, then the same amount of people can do more, which is great for a company's bottom line, or even go, okay, now we've got the capacity to launch new things without, taking from Peter and paying Paul. Yeah. It's, that's one of the things that I've seen lots of companies do is go launch, spread their staff so thin that the core events and the things that they were good at suffer for it as well. Yeah. So I think it's great that you've invested so much time in that education. We do it at Event Tech Live. We actually use a lot of our stuff. We use like pre-recorded videos on things like Loom and stuff like that, just so it's a resource that people can kind of look back to as well. It's like, oh, I've forgotten about that. I don't really want to ask Adam or Paul because I don't want it to look like I've not paid attention, but I'll just look at that, and then it's there. It's a resource for them. It's a library, and they get on with it, and it's super efficient in that way. So it's great to see you guys are doing the same.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And I think that some of the recordings are really great. So, you can go through a bunch of training with people. And now, I can open it up to the wider Montgomery Group, and we can go through a bunch of training and like you said, video it. So it's there as a reference. People can go back. So, if a new event manager starts, there might be, 3 or 4 sessions that you say, sit down and watch these, and you'll get a lot of the background information, because there is no doubt everyone is busy, and you can be really, really busy, but not really efficient, and not really effective, but really, really busy. And so what I'm trying to do is just help people, really identify those things that are most important and going to deliver the biggest impact. And then being disciplined to be like, I'm not going to do that. Would it be good to do that? Yeah, it would, but it's not part of what we're doing. It's not core. Get rid of it. Do the things that really matter. And I just think that's really important. I agree.
Interesting. I'm going to bring you back at some point once events have kickstarted again and you've rolled this out and you've had 3-6 months of experience. I'd love to bring you back and discuss some of your learnings and how you have moved and tailored that system on from where it is. You'll probably like launched, I don't know, 4 more new products, and there'll be all these crazy names, and I'd love to hear that. There's probably going to have to be some naming convention, here to keep on track.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up, I'd really like to ask you, what do these systems, what does that mean in terms of opportunity for Montgomery, do you think? What are the key principles taken out? Is that more events? Is that higher profitable events? Is that better satisfied exhibitors and attendees with content and meeting opportunities? Is it a combination of all of them? What's the future look like in terms of the opportunities out of this?
Yeah, I do think that the way we're focusing our efforts will have many benefits. So like you said, so I think it means that you can do more with less. It means that your satisfaction levels will increase for your exhibitors or your visitors. It ultimately impacts your profitability. But I do agree with you in terms of when you go to launch and having a systematic approach to launches, being able to not only get the right data and then interrogate the data in the right way so that you're going out with, again, segmented messaging right from the beginning. It certainly will create an ability to scale up and launch in the future. I'm not going to lie and say that I'm looking at a lot of that right now. I might have had a different answer if we spoke in January. But I obviously, who doesn't want to grow? And so I do believe that one of the benefits will be that whatever we have on our books currently will be done better and smarter and, more profitably with happier people. And then there will be that opportunity in the future when the time is right to look at other markets and succeed there.
Yeah. And I think probably one of the other things that I think you are going to be in a real strong position to do is maybe when it comes to M&A, and there may be opportunities for you to look at acquiring companies or events and things like that. Get a sample data, interrogate that data, see how they've got it set up, see how switched on they are and all that kind of stuff, what kind of processes they've got in, and actually, use that again as part of the decision-making process on, is this quality or is it just fiction based on what the experiences of somebody they're telling us?
Well, and we've looked at a few opportunities, and I would say there is a lot more fiction than fact in people's perception of the value of what they have.
Yeah.
So I would actually say that the approach that I'm taking is going to set us up much, much better for organic growth. And because of the multiples that we were seeing last year, and even the multiples I'm sure we'll see going forward, I actually want to make sure that we're in the best possible position to do organic growth, because that's obviously when you get that right, and if you have a higher probability of getting that right, I think that creates a lot more profitable opportunities.
It's a lot more cost-effective way to grow than going, I'm just going to take you out or acquire you because of you got this and this right, so. Yeah.
And although we're 125 years old and we do have a lot of events, we are privately owned, and we're just not going to be able to compete on price, when you're looking at some of these opportunities. So I think an organic growth strategy is wise for us.
But we'll see those 65 events on the backbone of Sherlock and Bento grow to 130 by the end of next year, Larry. That's the promise. Larry, thank you so much for coming on today's podcast. I would love to talk to you more again about what you're doing. I'd love to invite you to Event Tech Live to talk about what you're doing in November. For anybody listening or watching and they want to kind of connect up with you or check more out about your events in Montgomery, where should they go? Where should they look?
I mean, I think that I'm lucky that I have a unique name. I think I'm the only Laurie Hoinkes in the whole world. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest way to connect at this point.
Awesome. Laurie, again, thank you very much for coming on today's podcast. Everybody that's listening or watching, check out Montgomery Events, connect up with Laurie. If you've liked what you've heard today, please do share. It helps with the discoverability of this podcast. And this podcast is all about our industry learning from each other and getting better. Thank you for listening today, and we'll catch you in the next episode.